Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Creative Venture podcast. Today, I'm talking to reportage photographer Mark Bothwell. Mark has over 20 years of experience as a professional photographer, and his work has taken him as far-flung as the Sahara Desert, West Africa, and beyond. Starting initially in motorsports, Mark now receives commissions for portraiture and weddings. However, Mark is certainly not your average photographer. He's shot in venues like Westminster Abbey, the Houses of Parliament, and quite often for VIP clients. In addition to this, he's one of the recommended photographers for Hampton Court Palace, Kew Gardens, and the National Gallery. Mark is refreshingly honest, down to earth, and departs great knowledge for anyone wanting to take their career to the next level. In this interview, we discuss doing the work for you, how perspective can keep you motivated, and how and when to work for free.
When you have that conversation with that guy in that room, you're different to when you went in. Mm-hmm. When you come back out the door, the big telly and the car and the holiday and the new jacket you fancy, it's just all rubbish.
Welcome to the Creative Venture podcast. Mark Bothwell.
Hello. And Mark, thank you so much for coming all the way out to our holiday home in Hawaii. It's so incredibly generous.
Yes, it's lovely to be here. The sea, I mean, we just about got it outside the recording. Listeners, you might be able to hear that.
And who knew you would encounter Suffolk horse boxes on the way to our place in Hawaii.
There we go. Yeah, I had to reverse my boat. But Mark, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be talking to you, not only just because you've done so much interesting work, which we'll learn about a little bit, but also because you're very interested in podcasts. So I hope this lives up to expectations.
I am the person podcasts are aimed at. I'm the person that does 350,000 steps a month. So I consume an awful lot of podcasts.
Excellent. Well, I hope this lives up to expectations. But yeah, I'm just really excited to talk to you because you're a creative working as a photographer at the moment, and you've worked for some incredible venues, places like Westminster Abbey and photographed in the Houses of Parliament, Claridge's, the Savoy. So yeah, just tell me a little bit about what it is you do, and also tell me, for people that aren't aware, what is a reportage photographer, that sort of fly-on-the-wall documentary style?
Well, a reportage photographer, I think, is somebody who records an event without too much, they're not dictating the pace of it. There's very, very little formality. It's about turning up, being in the space, and shooting what you see. The objective being that what you're recording is real. The people that commission me to shoot weddings or corporate functions are people that want to look back on the set and feel as though they have a record of what it was actually like, rather than what I turned up and made it. I went for years avoiding shooting things like weddings because I thought they were just all formality. Mm-hmm. I thought it was just lining people up against hedges or walls and photographing groups. And a lot of the wedding stuff I used to see, it just looked just the same as mugshots in an Interpol catalogue. Just remove the numbers from underneath the faces.
Exactly.
But when I realised that I could do it in the style of which I was working when I was travelling and working in motorsport, I just stopped saying no. And I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed the fact that there was a clientele out there who wanted a photographer to do basically whatever they wanted. Mm. Not because I can't work to a brief, and not because I'm not comfortable doing what someone wants me to do, just because I think if by definition you're creative, you're going to get the most out of it, any creative, if you leave them to do what they're best at.
Yeah.
And the individual knows what they're best at.
Which I think is so evident in your work, actually. I mean, if anyone now that's just thinking, I'm chatting to a standard wedding photographer, have a look at Mark's work. It's a very individual style, and reportage documentary, fly on the wall. That is the style, and you capture moments. But tell me a little bit about, for anyone that's listening that thinks, wow, how do you end up at all these really exclusive London venues? Because you've been doing this for 20 years now or more. So just give us a little context into how you got started.
Specifically in weddings, I went for years saying no, as I said, because I didn't think I could do it the way I wanted. So I've been a photographer since I was 19. Mm-hmm. Initially working in motorsport all over the world. I started off being a motorsport fan in my mid-teens. I had my father knew somebody who had a racing car, and he went along at the weekends. I used to go along and sort of help him and be part of his little pit crew. This is probably 14, 15 years old, and every now and then I'd take a few pictures, and then someone asked if they could use it, and we can blame that guy for the next 30, 40 years of my life, because I thought, this is easy. I could make money out of this. And I just did it a bit more. I sold a bit more. And then I decided midway through A-levels, this is going to be a far easier way of making a living than actually studying and properly working hard. So I just followed it. But remember, we're talking 88, 89.
Different times.
This is no internet. This is where tech was a fax machine. And if you wanted a meeting with someone, there was no Zoom or Skype. There was a phone call, probably another phone call. Then there was a face-to-face meeting. That was standard. And there weren't the quantity of people wanting to be photographers then. The creative, entrepreneurial attitude hadn't really taken flight.
Surfaced,
I wasn't aware of it, certainly. So it was just a case of grinding, and it was a case of just sort of grinding out more opportunities, meeting more people. It's a people game.
And am I right in thinking that you're doing this off your own back? You're not working for anyone at this point, right?
Yes, this is buying the minimum amount of equipment, doing it completely on my own.
Yeah.
I had no interest in working for anyone else as a staffer. That's never changed. That's all. I've always wanted to do my own thing. But when you're approaching things like that and you're not having access to maybe a pool of equipment, you're then buying stuff yourself.
Yeah, it changes the dynamic, doesn't it?
It does. I was also very keen not to get into debt. So it was really getting by on a shoestring kit.
Yeah, same here. Exactly how I started as well.
And I think that was really good, because even today I shoot in a fairly economical way. I shoot with a film mentality, even though I shoot digital.
Yeah.
Because I grew up thinking, well, another roll of film is going to be another X quid to E6 process.
Yeah.
And I still think like that now, even though you've got 300 or 400 shots left on the card.
Yeah. You've got to sit and edit them, and that's still time.
Yeah. But I think it's ingrained. It's burned into my brain to try and be economical. And I'm not staring at the back of the camera all the time, seeing what's going onto the card, because I know pretty much what I want. I know how to get it, by and large, not always.
Yeah.
So I think it really served me well. And the fact that I had to get out there and pitch. And I understand, these days, I understand exactly who my client is, which means I can largely avoid social media because I don't particularly want to wade through that muddy swamp.
Yeah.
I think my website communicates with who's going to hire me. So I can, and I don't have a Facebook account or a Twitter account. I use Instagram because it's easy.
And it's visual. It's a visual medium, isn't it? Makes sense.
It's a very complementary extension to a website. As I say, it's easy. If Instagram became difficult, I would just delete it. I don't have the patience for it. I also don't believe it's of that much benefit to me. I've never had a single person that said they hired me because of my Instagram account. But I have a lot of people that have hired me because of my website. Okay. So yes, but that's by the by.
So a lot of the topics we discuss on the podcast are really geared towards that up and coming creative, or for people that want to, level up. And there was so much you said there that really resonated. Things like trying to keep out of debt, trying to only buy the gear you need, because I think gear is a big one. There is way too much emphasis on gear in the beginning. So I feel, that serves as really great advice. And also, what's really refreshing to hear is that you had to figure things out for yourself, and that is a valid path. Because when I speak to people that have, say, the years of experience that you do, quite often their story is, oh, well, I just knocked on some doors, I wrote a covering letter and got a job and I was into the industry. But I don't feel that advice serves people in the creative industries today, because the landscape is so different. So could you take me through your initial hustle, where you had to, figure everything out, assemble that minimal amount of kit, and maybe some of the mental attitudes you had as well?
Yeah, I learned by reading. I'm not a big I'm a team player. I think a lot of people who work with me in the wedding realm would tell you, or I would hope they would tell you, I'm a team player within a group of suppliers. But within a team of photographers, I can't stand the idea of working with other photographers. I want to work. I want to work on my own. You know, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. I'm not an objectionable individual. I just don't want to work with other photographers. But I think that really, if I go back to late teens, 2021, it was really, really good to have to do it all myself. And because it wasn't as straightforward as sending an email, because it was actually the case of picking up the phone, arguing with the secretary to get me
get you who you want
to
to
get
speak
through to Joe Bloggs.
Yeah.
And then when the gruff Joe Bloggs guy picks up the phone and doesn't really want to talk to you, you've got to cut through that that initial barrier of reticence. And that's all just fascinating. And I think that's I think it's taken away from people starting now because it's easier to make an initial contact. And that's great. And I think I personally think more people shooting pictures for a living is fantastic. I think it's a great medium, and it's thoroughly enjoyable, and it's self-satisfying if you're at the right level. But I think it's much, much better if you're put in the situation where you've got to work it out for yourself, not just ping an email off. Because there is going to come a point where when you've gone past the email, you've got to do the pitch. You've got to meet the client in person. And at that point, a lot of people I come across are stumped because then it becomes a personal thing. I don't think college or university teaches you that side of it.
Yeah.
The theory is brilliant in the classroom or in the lecture hall, but I don't think there are many courses which tell you how to work a bit quicker when the light's failing.
Yeah.
I've never come across one of those.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. The reality is, oh my God, that road's closed. We're going to have to go around that way. Now we're late. It's starting to rain. We can't do what we wanted. The client's looking at you for a solution. And all of a sudden life becomes a plan B.
So where do those skills come from? Because this is the thing. I want to sort of dispel the myth that people are just born with these skills. I think these are skills people develop, but like, how do you go through? Because I mean, this is someone's wedding, you know, and especially the sort of weddings you're doing, exclusive venues, sometimes celebrities, like, you know, they're it's a lot riding on you. So how do you handle that, and where do you get the skills to do that?
Well, it's doing it wrong. There's nothing as transformative and scary as being in a situation and initially doing it wrong. And I specialized in wrong quite early on. But it went in and it was branded onto the brain. And I think, again, no one told me. I got stuck in, I did it wrong. And when you sort of stick your chin out, someone lands one on you, then the next time that punch is thrown, you know which way to duck or weave.
Yeah.
And I think it's a case of being in there, finding out what your limitations are. As a photographer, I, from very early on, avoided things I didn't think I could do.
Okay.
And to a certain extent, I still do it. I think if I'm asked to do something and I don't believe I can do it well, I just say no. I'm very lucky to be in a position to do that. But I don't really want to take myself, and this is completely contrary to what an awful lot of photographers or creatives in general will tell you. I'm not all that bothered about taking myself out of my comfort zone.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I have a style. I've honed that style over years. I also have a clientele who hire me because of that style. Doesn't make a lot of sense for me to become something else. I'm a professional photographer. It's not the most important thing in my life. My wife and my son are. Photography powers that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And as much as I try my absolute hardest, every time I pick up a camera, there are two things. I want to do something I know I can do well. And I also want to have a bit of fun. And I think that comes across particularly with weddings. When people first talk to me, I say to them, look, I'm not a boring guy to be around. We're going to have a laugh.
Nice.
When it comes to going up the road for 10 minutes doing a few shots, we'll have a laugh. We'll have a chat.
Yeah.
By the time
I've seen the brides running and all these cool like little things you get them to do.
Yeah, and it's just a bit of fun. And I think ultimately at that stage, if they think you're a bit of a freak and they don't want that approach, then
Yeah.
they'll tell you, and I don't get that job, and that's great because it wouldn't have worked in the long run.
Yeah.
But I think the bog standard wedding photographer has a reputation of being verbose, slow, taking a couple away across the field for 90 minutes so the drinks reception never sees them again. And none of that needs to be relevant at all. I don't work in any of those in those particular sort of traits. I'm there to shoot a day in a realistic, just let it rip, see what we get sort of way. And I also listened to one of your other podcasts, Mark.
Thank you.
Ben, your opening episode,
Yes.
and he was talking about shooting some weddings, and he was talking about just stopping because he was so stressed. And that was interesting to me because the only part of shooting a wedding that doesn't stress me out is the photography.
Well, I think this is the thing that, I mean, what I've got in your answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, there's two little things I want to put a pin in. One, you've got impeccable boundaries and self-respect with your art form, which I'm interested to know, is that a recent thing or is that something you developed in the past? But also that you pursue the happiness. You're on about the most important thing is your wife and your child. And that's amazing. When you come to start to master your craft, you get your 10,000 hours in, you start focusing on, okay, this is what makes me happy and I want to pursue what makes me happy. So yeah, how have you developed really stringent boundaries where you just tell people, no, this is what I do, like it or lump it?
I think if any successful photographer, and I can't speak for poets, artists, painters, whoever, I can only speak for, I've only got a photographer's mentality. I think if you're successful and you're honest, it should be a fundamentally selfish pursuit, because at the time of deciding how to frame something, deciding on the exposure, deciding when to click the shutter, only you are making those decisions. No one else is helping you. There's no little angel on your shoulder guiding you. It's only you. When you're editing, you're deciding on color balance. You're deciding on cropping or not. When it's selection and putting the selection to the client, again, it's only you. The client only gets involved when you're finished. Right up to that point, it's entirely selfish. I've made all the decisions. And that's the way my mind works. So the reason I say that is because I don't want to do anything unless it pleases me. And again, I apologize if that sounds at all objectionable, arrogant. I really don't mean it that way. But you've got to have the courage of your convictions.
I think for so many starting creatives, especially people that I know, and I've been in this experience, the client asks you to do something which may or may not be on brief. It might be contrary to your brief. It's an extra thing. But you're like, oh, yep, I'll do that. And yep, we can get it done in half the time. And I really think that I can understand why people do it. You don't want to lose a client and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, people will take advantage of that. And I can see that some people might not get where you're coming from, but I just think it's great that you have those boundaries in place. And I think it's really important for the work we do as creators.
But look, I was exactly the same. You're scared stiff to let someone down initially. And I'm not saying all clients know that and exploit it. A lot of them don't. A lot of them are great people and they'll nurture young talent. But any opportunity you want to absolutely embrace and make the most of when you're starting out, well at any point. But you don't know, you don't have that self-confidence. You don't have the courage of your convictions at that age. You can't, because that comes and that's galvanized with experience.
Right.
And I liken it to, and I said this to someone the other day, I liken it to a suit of armor. I've got, wherever I go and whatever I do, I'm wearing this little invisible suit of armor and nothing can get through it because that armor is made out of pretty solid confidence. I'm also quite comfortable with handing something to a client. And although I don't want this reaction, if I'm really, really, really happy with the work, which I would hope is most of the time, and the client has an issue with it, then of course I will do everything I can to appease them and to solve the problem. But it doesn't stop the fact that I'm really happy with it. Now, conversely, if I hand something off that I've had to I've had to hand off that I'm maybe not happy with, whether it's a time constraint, whether it's a budget issue, whether things just conspired against getting the result you sought in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not happy with it, but the client's over the moon, despite the fact that the whole point of the project was to please the client.
Mm-hmm.
I remain frustrated.
Mm.
So that comes right back to being selfish.
Yeah.
You've got to have a feeling of satisfaction, because otherwise, over time, that will eat away at you, and it will become more and more difficult to go into a tricky situation thinking, well, this is going to be fine because I know what I'm capable of. I know what I'm good at, what I'm bad at, and I can stand up for myself. I've had wedding clients before, who've, for whatever reason, haven't liked what I've done. I've met them for a drink. It's a big mistake, to try and discuss what the problem was.
Yeah,
and
smooth it over.
And one particular lady, she stood up in a rather well-to-do bar in London, in a London hotel, and she screamed at me to the point where people were turning around looking embarrassed for me.
Wow.
And she basically screamed at me that I'd ruined her wedding.
Wow.
And there were lots of factors involved, and it worked out in the end. But the problem with that particular situation was that the photographer, or the photography very initially, is the first evidence of that wedding.
Mm.
Although friends and family have taken photographs, they're not the kind of photographs the photographer's doing. They're different.
Mm-hmm.
They have just as much value, the family shots and the iPhone shots. Of course they do. But the photographer is seeking something different. So I was the first physical representation of what her day was looking like, and for various reasons she wasn't very happy.
Oh, no.
But anyway, I was able to sit there and take all the brickbats and think, well, I'm kind of happy with what I did. I'm really sorry, and I hate that you're not, but I am happy. Of course, in the moment, that made it worse.
Yeah. But it's great that you've got the emotional faculties to be able to do that, because it's so interesting. I'm really fascinated about what makes different people react in different ways. Again, I understand what you're saying with experience. With experience, it contextualizes everything you've got. So for the beginning creative, it's something I say on this, which are, words I've borrowed from other people, I must add. You're talking about confidence, something that's because you've landed the ball in the basket numerous times. You're confident, but in the beginning you need courage. And I think when you're in that courage phase, a situation like that, man, that's going to set people back,
Yeah, but I have an advantage because, again, I learned my trade before the internet.
Yeah.
And I think the internet, and then social media, which is the sort of the ugly child of the internet, to my mind, there wasn't a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't concerned with pleasing my peers.
Okay,
And I look around at Twitter and Facebook posts and Instagram posts, and I think if people are really honest, a massive proportion of what they're posting is to impress their peers.
Yeah,
that's what I see with photographers, particularly. I don't care what my peers think, for no other reason than it does me no good. If they think it's poor, then fine. If they think it's great, well, fine. None of it does me any good. I don't really care. But I'd never had that distraction. Now, if you take an impressionable 19, 20, 23-year-old young guy or girl who's a photographer or trying to be a photographer, and they're matching not only their levels of confidence, trying to gauge their levels of confidence, which is a struggle at that age. They've also got this white noise of Instagram because they're seeing all these other people falsely doing amazingly well.
Without the context,
But it can only be a distraction. I never had any of that. I just had route one. I just had get some kit, do your best, do it wrong, remember and learn doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So you minimize that going forward. But I think that was a massive advantage. So whereas it's easier now to get kit, to buy a DSLR, buy a MacBook, get stuck in, do it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think it's harder because you've got this distraction of all the other people around you who you can't help but see are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's not positive.
I think one of the things I'll chime in on as well is that, if you are in that, because everyone does need to fail, like it is part of the learning experience, but definitely in my experience, and I think you can apply this to photography and most other art forms, there are certain jobs that are better to fail on than others. So for example, I work in the film industry. I do a lot of independent films and things. There are films where you can leverage different things. Some of them, are very, very low paid. Some of them are with people that don't have very much experience. So if you are starting out, seek out those projects, because depending on what the mistake is, it's probably not as serious on that level than it is, I don't know, you're making a Netflix hit or working on someone's wedding that's a celebrity or something like that. So I think, failing in the correct environment is very important. I think also, though, you had to exercise more real life social skills. Whereas a lot of people are navigating, communicating online, you probably had more sort of face-to-face contact. And there's pros and cons to social media. I think it's a platform. It gives people access where there wasn't access before, but it's definitely something that people need to manage and just be mindful of, that what are we looking at? Is this really what's happening?
Yeah, and I think also, let's make no mistake, needing to have the people skills was not some incredible light bulb moment for me. It was a necessity.
Yeah.
I had to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't earmark it as something I should be good at.
Mm-hmm.
I had to be good at it. So I take no credit for being good at it. I just had to be. But it's true. But that's why I stopped doing motorsport and wanted to sort of cultivate something like weddings and corporate photography, because it was essentially people-based. Motorsport, sport in general, exists to sell products. It's a fundamentally manufactured event designed to sell things. A wedding essentially is a happy day because of a happy reason, populated by happy people. And why would you not want to be part of that? Mm-hmm. Because happy people make for better pictures than glum people. My stunning insight, sorry. But my experience of working with sports people and one or two of the higher profile subjects that I've shot weddings, it's hard work. You start dealing with egos. It's bloody hard work because you're dealing with red tape. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with management. You're dealing with agents. You're dealing with people slowing the process down, adding unnecessary friction. Mm-hmm. I don't want that. I want a really great couple who want to leave me just to play in the background, be a legal peeping Tom, and I think that's why would you not want to be involved with that? And how lovely to think you could produce something that in 10, 20, 30, 40 years time is going to be pulled off a shelf or pulled off a hard drive or whatever. And they're going to look at those shots. They're going to go down the rabbit hole of what their day was. That doesn't exist in sport. 3 or 4 weeks after the sporting event has taken place, there's been another one. So the relevance of what you did has been already diminished. This is a big responsibility. I love the responsibility of shooting a wedding. I love it. I worry about stuff like getting there on time, where I'm going to park, making sure I've got the timings in my head. But the actual photography, that's the fun bit. That's not the stressful bit. Grab a camera, bolt the 50mm on there and get your helmet and pads on and get stuck in. It's brilliant. It's great.
So, I mean, one of the things that you touched on there as well is people, and you have an affinity with people. You seem interested in people. And one of the things I see on the life cycle of the creative is amassing a community. So I'm interested to know, because you tell me that, well, I like sort of being on my own and being that, to use your word, the selfish one, I edit and I'm in control. But then also, like, obviously you're producing a lot of work people are very happy with, really done some incredible stuff. So how important has community been for you, and how have you built your community?
Well, the client base is you do good work will find you. I don't care whether that's at 49 years old as I am, or whether it's at 19 years old. You do good work will find you. With regard to a community, I don't believe I have one.
Okay.
I'm not in regular touch with any other photographers. I know a lot of photographers, and I'll have the occasional message ping back and forth, but not in a social sense.
So when you were up and coming, and let's say that, I don't know, you had a failure or there was a problem, or you will have charged different rates as you're coming up, like how would you learn that stuff? I mean, normally I would imagine most people sort of bounce off each other when they're in problems, or they ask questions about how they run their business and stuff. Like, did you ever have anything in that realm or not?
No. I remember specifically pricing. So the first picture I ever got published for, I got 45 quid. And that was the cover of the Brands Hatch fixture list for 1988.
Cool. That's quite cool.
I've got it somewhere, I think. I probably shouldn't look at it because I'll probably critique the hell out of it and burn it.
A lot of time's gone by. But
Yeah. So really, they said, how much do you want for it? And I said, I don't know, 50 quid. And the guy said 45. So I said, done.
Bastard.
So I'll track him down one day.
Yeah.
But I think I just got a feel for how much things should cost. Right now, I charge what I charge for a wedding based on the amount of time it takes to create the result. I had someone the other day said, why do you charge that amount? I said, well, because a wedding for me is a working week. And this is pretty much how much I charge if you hired me per day.
Yeah.
And there's your result. And they're happy with that. If they don't think it's a figure plucked out the sky,
Yeah, it's gotta make
and you
sense.
can explain it, there's a structure behind it, by and large, people are happy. But no, there wasn't. I would say specifically, freelancing in motorsport in the early days was kind of like the Wild West. For me. It wasn't a case of having a pricing structure. It was more the fact that the marketplace was only as strong as the cheapest quote.
Right.
So if there was someone else there that was going to charge 50 quid, then you were wasting your time at 75. Doesn't take a brain surgeon to work out that to get the job, you need to drop your price because the other guy knew that he could get it for 50. As you become better known, people come to you because of what you can do, not because you're just some Joe who has something they need and they can buy it for 50 quid. And then you've got some leverage.
Do you think that's important advice then? You try and say to people, look, produce the best work you can, get out of the rat race and put yourself above.
I think so. I think that would be obvious advice in any industry. I've also got a bit of a theory on working for free. And again, this is going to have other photographers who might listen to this sticking pins in a Mark doll, but I'll survive. I think working for free is pretty productive. I've worked for free a lot. I've worked for free recently. It's not free. It was free of a rate. I wasn't paid, but there was a reason behind it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will add things. For example, if a wedding couple have paid me to shoot their wedding, they've commissioned me to produce a book. Then they come back to you 6 months later and say, my mum and dad want a book. Oh, maybe I'll throw that book in. I've already earned X amount of money from them. I'm not a greedy individual. I want to give them value. But the thinking behind that is I also want them to disappear off into the ether saying, look, you should use this guy because we enjoyed the process.
Yeah.
He wasn't screwing us down for every last pound, which is a very short-sighted way of working anyway. And it's amazing how often that goodwill comes back to you.
Do you know what? I was so surprised that you'd say that you do free work, but I'm so happy to hear that because I think that's a really excellent philosophy. And I have one question though, because with my own personal work, and again, this is a stolen idea, but I will try and get 2 of 3 things. So money, relationships, and something for the show reel. The show reel is obvious because that gets you work in your own right, makes you feel good, and it establishes your skills. Money, everyone wants money because I can't pay my rent with exposure. And relationships, like you're saying with the book, that's vital because that's what the business is built on.
But what would you say to people that have done a few free gigs? And, you know, in the beginning, doing some free work is an excellent way to sort of get your foot in the door. But what happens if people are starting to take advantage and they now feel a bit stuck only working for free?
Well, I don't think you should make it a regular thing. Otherwise, it's not a profession, it's a hobby. I'm selective with what I do.
Yeah.
And again, I would say I've done the work for free, but free as in no money. It's very rarely been without advantage to me.
Exactly, yeah.
I'll give you an example. I shot a wedding in about 2010, 2011 in Kew Gardens. Kew Gardens at that time wasn't really a widely known as a busy or sought after wedding venue. They were just kind of feeling their way,
Right.
from what I can understand and remember. And it was a candlelit wedding. And they happened to see some of the work, and they said, "Can we use it?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And they said, "Oh, how much will it cost to use it?" And I said, "Well, if you put me on a suppliers list, then nothing at all."
Excellent.
I now shoot 15, 16 weddings a year at Kew as a recommended supplier, and have done for many years.
Yeah, strategy.
That could easily have not gone anywhere. I think common sense would suggest to you it would have been unlikely to have not gone anywhere, and that's why I did it. But I've also shot weddings for people where it was appropriate not to charge. Another example, you need to get a hanky for this. I had cancer in 2011, and I photographed ultimately the wedding of my Macmillan nurse.
Wow.
So thank God for autofocus, because she was crying coming down the aisle. I'm not sure I was particularly dry-eyed as she was coming towards me. But there was no money involved. But what a great thing to do. You know, there was no money involved with that as a thank you. It wasn't a case of getting something out of it, because I was still living and breathing. I'd kind of already I'd already gained at that point, because my body was still working. So she guided me through a situation. So I gave something back.
Yeah.
There was no money involved. Money can complicate things, but I think, if you're not greedy, if you pay what you believe you're worth, look, there are tons of wedding photographers in London more expensive than me, and there are tons who are cheaper. But again, who cares? I'm concerned with developing a business, developing a clientele. It works. I'm happy. I don't seek millionaire status. So it all works. It's not broken, so I'm not going to try and fix it.
And in terms of that potentially life-changing diagnosis, has that changed any of the way that you look at like life and business and creativity?
Yeah, 100%. It's I mean, I wouldn't recommend cancer. Don't rush out. Don't rush out and do it. It's tricky, but it's the ultimate life detox. Because when you have that conversation with that guy in that room, you're different to when you went in. When you come back out the door, the big telly and the car and the holiday and the new jacket you fancy, it's just all rubbish. It's about family. It's about fundamentals. I don't think it should take that conversation with that guy in that room to lead you to that conclusion, but sadly it does. And from that point on, I've now got the ultimate context, because if I'm having a problem on a job and it's pouring down and it's freezing cold and the camera's not behaving itself, which sometimes they can do, and a lot of the things you wanted to do aren't possible, do you know what? We'll get round it.
Yeah.
Because I had cancer once, and that was more important than this.
Yeah.
And that really helps. And I think that's a really negative thing in someone's life. And I think if you can take that and you can mold it and you can bend it to your will and create something positive from it, literally is not the end of the world. Because I've looked down the barrel of that gun. It's not a very nice sight. I remember how it felt. Photography's photography.
Hey there, guys. Well, we're not over just yet. I just wanted to chime in really quickly and say, if you're not already following us on Instagram and Facebook, we are at The Creative Venture. I'm really responsive on comments and DMs, so it would be lovely if you wanted to reach out and say hello. That's at The Creative Venture. But without further ado, on with the show.
That is a great source of motivation. You know, you're thinking, well, things could always be worse. But even before then, like, I imagine you must have been a fairly motivated person. Am I right? Like, where does that stem from?
I get massive enjoyment from the success of others. I am a big movie fan. I always have been. And I love films that I enjoy. When people win awards for them, I feel really happy.
That's great.
I feel like I'm really part of their little success, because I paid my £9.50 to watch whatever, and I've contributed to that success. So I like that, and I don't need to reach out and be a cinematographer. I could never do that. I don't need to try and be something I'm not, but I'm more than happy to thoroughly enjoy the fact that they can do it well. And I honestly get a bit of juice from other people doing stuff well. It maybe compounds. It maybe compounds my own enthusiasm for my own profession. I'm just a guy that picks up a camera for a living. Like I said, I've met neurosurgeons. They operate on people's brains. They're cleverer than me. I just focus a lens. That's pretty sobering. And I think if you can show a degree of humility, understand where you fit in the grand scheme of things, and just crack on and be pretty grateful, I think ultimately that's a really positive frame of mind. But I get satisfaction from loads of things. I get satisfaction from reading great books. I don't need to rush out there and try and be an author, but I love the fact that they're a good author. That's really satisfying for me. And it's really fantastic. I'm so excited at the moment because Hugo, our son, is 5, almost 5. I'm going to primary school very soon.
Wow.
And I just can't wait for him to come across some of the things that I can vividly remember motivating me. I'm desperate to sit down and show him Star Wars. I know you're not a big Star Wars fan, so we were.
You've heard the podcast.
I've done my research, my friend.
Excellent.
But I want to sit there, and already he's showing an amazing imagination. We're lying on the floor in the playroom shooting slow-mo iPhone videos of monster trucks hitting Lego bricks, and then he's insisting that I crop off the first few seconds because the intro's a bit slow, and I'm just a bloody 5-year-old. But that's incredible, that's going to be amazing to see all that. So going forward, photography for me is a wonderful thing. Incredibly lucky to do for a living what tens of millions of people do for a hobby. Let's bear that in mind. But ultimately it's a job, and it's not as important as some other things in my life. I don't go out there and die for my art. I'm not going to bark at people if they ruin my creative vision for my day. I just go around the other side and do it there.
So if you've got to think of a couple of things that matter and that don't matter in the sphere of sort of photography, or even like life in a way, what would you say those are?
To a certain extent, gear doesn't matter. The camera, if you didn't switch it on and pick it up and do stuff with it, it wouldn't take any photographs. So it's you making the difference. Just make sure you have something reliable, but don't think that spending 3,000 or 4,000 on a DSLR that you don't need is necessarily going to get you better work. Thinking will get you better work. Researching and honing your craft will get you better work. And then you'll realize why the other cameras exist, and you need them. You need them because they have 2 SD card slots, or you need them because the body sealing is better and you're going to be working in bad weather or something like that. But up until that point, no, just buy what you can afford and do as much as you can and earn the upgrade. Don't think the upgrade's going to pull you along.
Oh yeah. So that's wise words there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that would be the same with anything, wouldn't it? I think a better laptop's not going to get a better manuscript.
Exactly. And what matters to you? What's something that's really important?
What matters specifically in the realm of photography, what matters to me more than anything is self-satisfaction. Of course, the people who employ me, their opinion matters, because without their opinion being taken into consideration and satisfying, then I'm not going to have a business. But like we went over before, unless I'm happy, the chances are they're not going to be. Therefore, my self-satisfaction is paramount, because I want to go to bed, or I want to finish the day, or I want to come downstairs and sit at the dinner table thinking, yeah, that was good. I'm really happy with that. Because when you walk on that little few millimeters of air, that is satisfaction. And I think any creative would say the same. That's brilliant. It sometimes doesn't last very long. And I have a real problem going back. As much as I like to do books and things for people who got married a few years ago, I find it quite hard to go back over work that I've done.
Interesting,
Because all I do is pull it apart. All I do is see the errors. It's the old golf analogy that it's not good shots that win it, it's bad shots that lose it. And I think a selection of pictures for me is defined by what I don't think I did absolutely correctly. Because the good stuff is a given, isn't it? Because I'm a photographer. Why should people... I never understood why goal scorers got a bonus where they scored goals. That's why they're there. Why would you get more? I mean, obviously it's a good agent negotiation, but I'm a photographer. Why would people be over the moon when I did it well? That's why I'm there.
Yeah. And sort of on similar lines, talk to me about looking after yourself, because often you're working like long days, crazy hours. How do you recharge and have fun and look after yourself? Do you have any rituals around, say, sleep or like,
Well, let's rewind to the 5-year-old. I'm in no control over my sleep.
There is no life, yeah.
No, especially when at 3 a.m. you hear boop, 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 boop,
oh no,
boop, boop, and then a little bounce onto the bed, and then that's it. That's the rest of the evening.
You're awake.
The rest of the night sleep screwed.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's segue, because what advice would you give for creators that have children? Because I think that people that have children that have got to navigate the whole freelance or self-employed lifestyle, what are your sort of thoughts on that? Because that must be a real challenge.
Well, that's fascinating in itself, isn't it? Because don't you think now that suddenly, I was going to say post-COVID-19, we're nowhere near post-COVID-19, are we? We're in the middle of it. Suddenly, even if you're a staffer,
Mm-hmm.
you are working like a freelance because you're at home.
Yeah.
You have the nursery run or the school run, whereas perhaps maybe someone else would have done it at that point.
Mm.
You're doing your Zoom call, your Skype call with your boss or your client, and the cat jumps on the keyboard or little Johnny swings on the lampshade behind you. That's the freelance life, Even if you're out of the office for a few days, even if I think what will happen is the balance will be a few days back in the office, a few days at home. But the few days at home is going to be living like a freelance.
Yeah.
You've got to try and compartmentalize. You've got to try and steal yourself away into a corner where you can focus.
Yeah.
Whether that's buying yourself some amazing noise cancelling headphones and sitting at the kitchen table while all around you is bedlam, then that's fine.
And how much does organisation play into that? Because I read an article, I think you'd written, called The Photographer's Diary, where you break down and explain your schedule for the day and show all the planning that goes into a wedding shoot, which is a fair bit. And I wonder, does that organisation pass over into other aspects of your life off the job?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm one of these people who will block out time within a day to do certain things. And I'll set my watch to say, okay, have a walk. I'm a big believer in structure and in habit. And I don't want to be working in the evening necessarily if it takes away family time.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, I want to get in the maximum amount I can out of the day. And if that means doing a bit of editing and a bit of book design and then some admin and then some invoicing, I'll break it all down on a Google Cal so I know where I am. It's all a bit anal. But for me, it works because each particular component part of that day is important. There aren't many days where you can spend doing one thing. I think rest is massively important. And I'm really guilty of having abused my body, working too hard, hours too long. I've done wedding days before where I've left the house at 7. I haven't been back until 3. I've maybe shot a job the following day and I've been out of the house at 6 again. And all I've done is drink water. And I think that talking to oncologists back in the day and talking about looking after yourself, I learned things about my body and about what I should be doing that probably paints me as pretty remedial because I never realized the importance of them before. And it took being ill to have those fundamentals explained to me, which probably means I was a bit stupid in the first place. I just think it's in moderation in everything, You've just got to
look after your health, though, guys. If there's anything you take away from this, But
yeah, if you can just get as much sleep, don't go to bed late. Hey kids, don't stay up late.
Yeah.
Specifically addressing a young freelance photographer, you will find what suits you. Don't be too impressed by the little Instagram white lies that you're seeing. Don't be too impressed by your heroes or the people who influence you. Find your own path. Be inspired. Don't necessarily be influenced. For me, there's a big difference. If you're influenced by someone, you're going to kind of try and copy what they're doing a little bit. You're going to be inspired by someone. You're going to use their success to power yourself forward in another area without mimicking. If If you're going to mimic someone, then by definition, you're already one step behind, aren't you? Because they've already done it. So that's not the way forward. And also, photography, like anything, is entirely subjective. There is not a right or a wrong. There is just what you like. And there will be clients out there who like what you do. You've just got to find them.
Yeah.
And that might take a few days. It might take a few months. But one thing leads to the other. Just stick to your guns. Because there'll be jobs that you do when you become successful where all you have to rely on are your instincts. And you will never develop instincts like someone else. You develop your own and rely on them. And already you've got building blocks there, haven't you? You've got instinct, self-respect, confidence, some people skills, and you stick all them in a bowl and stir, and you've got a career.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a little bit as well, just for the audience being creatives, a lot of them being young. Financial literacy is really important. And while people are sort of doing, as you say, figuring things out, and that may well take maybe 2 or 3 years to set up a business. So what sort of thoughts have you got around financial literacy for people that are building a business as a photographer?
I can only compare to it being different in as much that young professionals, young adults, chances are staying at home longer than they were.
Yeah.
If my generation were thinking about leaving home at 22, 23 or a post-uni period of their lives, that same individual now is probably thinking those things at 28 or 29 simply because of rents and mortgages. So maybe take advantage of that. Maybe take advantage of the fact that you're at home a bit longer. Take advantage of the stability of that and know that breaking into a creative industry, I don't believe, some might disagree, I don't think it's an age-restrictive thing. I've read about a lot of people photographers, authors, whatever, who found success pretty late. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's really, really good. So financially, I think for me, the big enemy is debt. Big enemy is debt.
Yeah.
Because if things don't quite go the way you plan, then already you've got a disadvantage. Not only have you got to make up your living expenses, you've got to claw back what you've already paid out. So just be sensible.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think a lot of it's just living within your means, being as careful as possible. And again, not getting caught up in those silly purchases, because I think in the internet age, there's information everywhere. You don't necessarily need to go out and spend loads of money doing X, Y, Z. A lot of information, if you shop around, is free. Yeah, well answered. I think we'll go into a bit of a quick fire round. But first, my final question is, it's been a crazy, 3, 4, 5 months in this sort of, I suppose, nearly post-COVID world. Just talk to me a little bit about how it's been, what your observations are for maybe the future and how that's going to affect employed people and self-employed people as well.
Well, I read a great article the other day, I think it was in the Bloomberg Weekly magazine, saying that all of a sudden, analysts are predicting that because people will start shedding jobs, and I think as the year continues, I think we are yet to see the real financial impact.
Yeah.
I think as people start losing jobs, sadly, a lot of people are going to retraining. So I think it's a case of if you are a staffer and you're in your mid-20s, you're doing something you don't really want to do, but you harbour this creative ambition, maybe you can turn crisis into advantage, and you can either retrain or take a bit of time, step back, just go for it. Nobody in my experience has ever found the right time to go freelance. I've always been freelance. I can't imagine being a staffer. That would just worry the hell out of me. I would feel so unstable. So I've got that sort of freelance mentality. But if you've been a staffer and you kind of like the idea of self-employment, there's not going to be a signpost and a fork in the road saying go left, freelance, go right, continue start. You're going to have to find it and do it.
Yeah.
So force yourself into it, because unless you pursue it, you certainly won't find it.
I think there's really, with the internet and the tools and the resources and the advice, there's never been a better time to do
a sort of creative endeavor. And I think also that, even if you have a job and you have this inkling that, oh, maybe I could do something creative, start a side hustle, like get some skills on the side, because you never know where that might take you. And heaven forbid that there's another, big situation like this in our lifetimes. But I think being able to have several strings to your bow is just only going to be an advantage. So yeah, like definitely consider doing some of this stuff, because it's good.
just go for it. Please yourself. Go for it. Yeah.
I think also, like, in terms of job security for people, like you're saying, like if you are employed, it's always felt like a safe option for so long, but it's not until now that it's sort of it is uncertain, because the people that are employing you are exactly the same. They are like you, a self-employed person, or they're running businesses, they're entrepreneurs, and unfortunately, like, you almost have less say, because they have the ultimate control. They make the decisions. Whereas if you're a freelancer or whatever, it's hard times, like 100%. It's hard for everyone, but at least you've got some control. Do you know what I mean?
I think that the strength of successful self-employment has been demonstrated by lockdown, COVID-19 so far, because I feel very comfortable that my prosperity is in the hands of 30 or 40 individuals over the course of a year, or companies. A few of them are going to cancel jobs. A few of them are going to postpone jobs. In the main, they carry on. But if you're a staffer, you're going to get that memo on the Friday afternoon or the Monday morning, and all your eggs financially in one basket. And you don't really ever know how well your company's doing. I don't care what anyone says. You never really know, big or small. I want to see trouble on the horizon, and before trouble comes over the hill and finds me, I want to already have my plan B in place. That to me that's comfortable. But again, it's not for everyone. But I think right now I'm very happy that self-employment is possibly going to come out of COVID as a really, really much more viable option, especially creatively.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it's about, like, can you detect opportunities? I mean, if you look at, say, for example, like, I don't know, let's say that you set up an e-commerce business literally just before lockdown hit. I mean, great, because people aren't going into, like, high street shops are closed by law. Do you know what I mean? If you set up an e-commerce business, I mean, there is actually someone that's on the podcast that went into, not because of COVID, but went into developing medical caps. And, then when they saw the demand for the face coverings, and they've also, they've done very well out of that, which is cool. It's just about, like, because I think there's so many people that will just talk about the doom and gloom, and I don't want to take away from how hard legitimately it's been for a lot of people, but there is always opportunity. Like, if you can be of the mindset where you can see the opportunity in that, I think that's just a great place to succeed, right?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then thinking about the audience being creative, and then also the larger conversation. Is there anything I haven't asked that you feel I should have?
I don't think so. I think it's been. I think we've covered an awful lot. I think I would like to emphasise the fact that no one's going to come and sort of pick you up by the scruff of the neck and say, "Come and be creative." You've got to go and do it yourself. You don't want to get to a certain age in life and regret the road not taken, because that's going to eat away at you. Even if you fail, have a go.
Yeah.
Because at least you can say you tried.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than just not trying, because then really you've only got yourself to blame. And I'm very, very well aware that I speak from the privileged position of being relatively successful. I do something very enjoyable for a living. But a massive amount of it was luck, meeting certain people along the way, getting certain opportunities. Everyone will have those chunks of luck, or those little moments of luck. It's a case of trying to grab them.
Yeah, it's putting yourself in the right places.
I read something a long time ago, and it said, and this article said that when you start out in whatever profession, you try 5 things, 4 things fail, and 1 thing kind of works. A little bit later on, you try 5 things, and 3 things fail, but 2 things work. When you get further down the line, you try 5 things, 4 things work and 1 thing fails. And that's kind of the way it turns around. And I think maybe understand that it will get easier and better. And then before you know it, it will feel quite straightforward. And you won't even imagine that you went through the struggles you did. You are the sum of the parts of your life and your career. And you, I think also freelancing, you reap what you sow. You just try, get stuck in, give it your best. And if you can really kind of look yourself in the mirror and say you have given it your best, then that in itself is an element of success.
Yeah.
Just don't not bother. No one will do it for you. Yeah. And of course, if all else fails, just cheat. No, you can't.
We can't end on that. There we go. Well, that's it. No, excellent. Well, Mark, yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been really refreshing. And yeah, where can people find you online as well?
Well, the website is markbothwell.com. There's no point going to Twitter. There's no point going to Facebook. And if you really have to, look at the Instagram, but just go to the website. There's all sorts of ramblings on there that are far more fun.
Excellent.
And thank you, Mark, for coming all the way out to Hawaii.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Safe flight home.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's been a good one. Cheers.
Take it easy.
And there we have it. I really hope you're enjoying these episodes. This is now episode 6 of The Creative Venture. I've got some big things planned for the future. But yeah, guys, if you're not already, get on Instagram and Facebook, follow us. We're at The Creative Venture. I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. And thank you so much if you're one of the people that's already actively engaging with our content, commenting on all of that stuff. I've had some wonderful DMs from people. So yeah, until next time, take care, and I'll see you on the next Creative Venture podcast.